thought I was tired, which is not entirely untrue, but I'm trying to get in my gamer stance here, okay?
Oh.
Not sponsored, by the way, not sponsored by Monster. I also ate Taco Bell, not sponsored by Taco Bell. But I need to get in the correct mindset to really judge games. Everybody knows if you are on the internet and you're judging games, you've probably recently consumed Monster Energy drink and ate Taco Bell. So that's what I had to do.
I have not done either of those things in a very long time. I'm more of the Mountain Dew and Doritos kind of gamer, you know?
Okay, that's same brand, different method, okay? But where did you do that?
No, God, no.
Neil.
No, I had a CBD gummy and I have a cup of water. That's what I have.
Oh, okay, so you're like a depressed gamer.
Oh, so true, so true.
Okay, well, now that that's out of the way, I guess we should do our little introduction.
Yes.
Video games, hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. It is the Audio Games
No,
Podcast. You
not
said
hello.
it already.
No, you also have to say it, though.
Okay, Video
we
Games,
both say
hello,
it.
everybody.
There we
This
go.
is the Audio Games Podcast. I'm Neil.
Thank you. I'm Matt.
And it's 2025. Happy New Year.
Happy belated New Year.
Belated, yes. But as y'all know, first podcast of every new year is us doing our Game of the Year style thing that we do.
Yes.
And we got 30 games. We got 30 games between the two of us that we played this year. And we gotta...
We sure do.
We gotta knock them out. So for those of you who haven't listened before, we kind of set up our list and we knock them out going, all right, what are we eliminating? And we
of what's left, what's the worst?
Yes. And then we take turns and move on up until we get near the top, when sometimes a little bit of arguments might happen, but usually we're okay. We're not get at each other's throats.
Sometimes we gotta cut some deals, but you know.
I have a feeling I'm gonna have to cut a deal or two this year. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know what you've played, so
yeah.
I have a feeling there's gonna be some deals cut, yes.
There's two games, one of which I want to see in the top 10 and one of which I want to see in the top 5-ish.
Oh, you have a locked-in top 5.
No. I just have like a game or two that I'm like, I want this to be up there.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and consolidate our two lists, unless you've already done that.
Oh, I have. Let me just put that in the chat for the two of us, so it's a little easier to see.
Yeah, we need to like have our draft thing so we can. Yeah.
There it is. One big list.
And a little extras to talk about.
Yeah, I think maybe we should just start with those, kind of get them out of the way, because they're not going to make it onto the list.
This ain't in alphabetical order.
No, it's not.
Okay, well, as long as we're cool with that. So there's some games that either should be in this list but aren't for technical reasons, or shouldn't be in this list but have been on other lists, we can say.
Mm-hmm.
And those games are like Hades 2. I love Hades 2. I played Hades 2 this year. It ain't technically out. It's early access. We cannot, in good stance and good mind and clear mind, put it on this list. And I know, we've put things in early access on our lists before. We were sloppy, but that was a different era. That was a different era. We're audio games now. We're a new classy brand, and we do things properly, which is exactly why Hades 2 cannot be on this list. It will most likely be on 2025's list, so it'll get its chance.
Fair.
And then we also have Caves of Qud, which released proper this year. It had 1.0 in December. Love that game. I have hundreds of hours in Caves of Qud. Quite frankly, if it was on this list, it would be a lock-in in my top 5 for me. But it can't be on this list because, as I said, we were sloppy in past years, and I'm pretty sure it was represented at least last year, and I can't in good conscience give it a second run. It just doesn't... It's not fair.
Okay. And speaking of not fair, Shadow of the Erdtree, I know some places were putting it up for Game of the Year. We had a little talk about it a while back, about how you and I don't really generally think of DLC as something that qualifies.
No.
It was one of the best gaming experiences I had this year, but it is also a part of Elden Ring. And we talked a shitload about Elden Ring, 3-4 years ago when we had to have this conversation? So
it's just unfortunate because your feelings have changed so much because of this DLC.
Well, that's the thing. The DLC on its own is way better than the base game, and if I'm taking it all together, it probably wouldn't be higher than mid for me either way. But,
and you can't take it separately because it's a DLC.
Correct. And then I think we should probably read this list out, huh? Let people know what we're working with to start.
Yeah, we should probably just go down the list.
Okay. So everybody, the 30 games we are putting into contention this year are UFO 50, Animal Well, Balatro, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Diceomancer, Marvel Rivals, Ballionaire, I Am Your Beast, Shogun Showdown, Ember Ward, Harold Halibut, which, actually, did that come out last year?
I think it did. Okay, let me double check. Let me look.
Double check that one. We might have 29
I'm gonna double check that. We might have 29 games.
I
might have just not thought too much about what I did.
Fair.
No, April 16th, 2024.
Oh, Jesus.
Release date.
Okay. Crazy. Daronco Wonko. Web Fishing. Odata. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Unicorn Overlord. Zenless Zone Zero. Palworld. Infinite Craft. Poke Rogue. Riven 2024. Peglin. Pokemon TCG Pocket. Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain. Dragon's Dogma 2. Nightmare Cart. Still Wakes the Deep. Pinball Spire. Neva. And Nine Souls.
Not a bad list.
Not a bad list. I want to just jump out here right away and say there's an asterisk on Nine Souls.
Because you're not done with it?
Because I'm probably only like 25% into that game. I'm really liking it a lot. It is something I want to put up pretty high personally. But also, recency bias and having not really gotten through even a full half of the game yet, I can see if we would want to eliminate it and kind of put it on the side list with Caves of Qud and stuff.
When did Nine Souls... Did it come out in December?
No, it was, I want to say, it might have been November or maybe September or something.
I think that we should probably keep it on this list. Oh. And the reasoning is, some of these games aren't really completable, quote-unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And other ones, I will fully admit that I didn't finish, but I felt like I have a strong enough opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, generally I try and distance myself from, major news outlets for video games, but in this way I am similar. I did not finish the game in a lot of cases, and I apologize for that, but it's been quite the year.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my year playing, So this is a weird year for me. Most of the games that I played from this year are not games I played on stream, where usually most of my games are stuff I played on stream. Which does have me in a kind of weird situation with a few of these, and that's part of why Nine Souls is stuck where it is because I'm streaming it, which means I'm getting through it way slower than I would otherwise.
Yeah, but you are enjoying it.
I am. So
how
if we're
much
not
are you
immediately
enjoying
taking that
We're
off the list, who's starting today?
That's a good question. So you're playing Nine Souls right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What have I been playing right now? I'm playing Indiana Jones. That's what I have not finished it, but I have a good enough opinion that I think I can place it. Which is I was gonna say in alphabetical order. That would put mine in front of yours. That's
sure.
I mean, this is just the methodology I came up with on the spot. All right,
yeah,
we didn't
go for it.
We didn't plan this far ahead.
We did.
But I'm gonna. This is such an easy pick for me, and I don't think you're gonna argue it. Palworld. at the
Oh yeah, that
bottom.
was number one on my list. To let's just get it the fuck off this
Let's
thing.
just get off this list. Um, Playing some softball here. Sorry, Pal World. I know. Some people really love Pal World. It's still being developed. I'm sure that some people have had this wonderful experience with Pal World, and there's been a lot of like discussion around Pal World, in terms of like what's been going on with Nintendo and their lawsuit. And actually, I'm not really up to date on that. I have no idea what's going on with that anymore. Lawsuits take years, so I'm not
Sure.
even sure if I'm gonna remember to look at it by the time it's done. I'm sure that other news outlets will put stuff out, but ultimately, my experience with Pal World was really, really horrible. I've only refunded like 3 games in my life, and Pal World was one of them, and that's because the official servers were completely to capacity to the point that trying to play the game as a newcomer, it just wasn't there. There was no space to build a camp. It was so laggy. Think like I'd just get disconnected and then I'd log back in and then it would have rolled back the server. So I like lost like 5 minutes of progress. And when you've only had like 12 minutes of gameplay, like that's like half your progress. Not literally doing the math, but around half your progress.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I refunded that shit. Not for me. I know that other people have played with friends and said it's really great experience. Also it reminded me of Ark. I played Ark for all of 15 minutes because I got it for like $2. It was on sale or whatever, and it was very much the same. If you like Ark, you'll probably like Pal World. I didn't like either. Yeah,
Fair,
bottom of the list,
totally fair.
and that puts the ball in your court, Neil.
That puts the ball in my court, and I gotta say, I'm a little bit torn because
Okay, well here let's give a little peel back of the curtain here and let people know. When you compare my list to Neil's list, Neil has a much shorter list.
oh, to be fair,
Uh-huh.
we both play. There's a fair number of stuff that we both played this year.
Sure.
We're not always as good at that. I did, I think 14 games, not including including Shadow of the Erdtree. So like 13 are on my list.
Right.
Which yeah,
So
you
my list
definitely
is
have a
longer.
bigger one. But let's see. Um, I think I'm probably gonna just eliminate Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain kind of right away here.
I disagree.
Really?
I hate to disagree so early.
I'm shocked.
uh,
It's just it's such a small thing that I was like, it's hard for me to consider it a full game, I guess. So I'm kind of like, it should probably be near
There's
the bottom.
other small things on here though.
All right. Well,
And
how about
and I know that Celeste 64 was kind of just like a little experiment that they were doing. There is good stuff in there, and
There is.
I enjoyed playing it. I will offer up as a alternative. How about Odada?
Okay. I don't know a lot about Odada, so tell me why it should be down here.
Odada is not necessarily a game by all definitions. It's kind of like
Okay.
it's a creative experience where you can sequence things to make little fun pieces of music.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was last podcast or the podcast before, but I talked about that game. I enjoyed it as an experience, but I don't see it going much further than, being towards the bottom of the list. Alternatively, I would also put up Web Fishing. Again, very short, casual, condensed experience.
Okay.
I think that these are not necessarily bad things, but in terms of like scope, they're so small in scope that it's hard to give them much more credit than they were fun little experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that stands shoulder to shoulder with Celeste 64, and I think that I don't see Celeste 64 going that deep, but I think that there's other things I'd rather put before it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let Odada be down there instead then.
All right.
I guess that's mine, Odada.
Okay. Then I guess I'll go ahead and put. I'll put Web Fishing after that.
Okay.
And again, Web Fishing, wonderful little experience, but limited. It is what you get. You get what it shows you on the cover, and it's like a little drop in multiplayer experience where you play a fishing minigame a lot and do upgrades to your fishing gear, and there's some fun little mini things you can do on the side. But ultimately, it's a very contained thing. It lacks polish. It probably needs more updates before it can, really be considered that big of a deal. So I'm very comfortable with having web fishing cut right alongside Odata, like I said. And again, I need to emphasize, this is not because they're not good games. It's just the scope is so small. It's hard to give more credit than that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of small scopes, Celeste 64.
I disagree, Neil.
Okay. Let me do a different one then. I think I gotta put Nightmare Cart up then.
Well, okay, tell me about Nightmare Cart.
So Nightmare Cart is a really fun, small experience, and it is a free one, so those of you out there, go check it out. There is a person out on the interwebs who decided to make a little thing called the Bloodborne demake way back when, where they kind of remade a bunch of Bloodborne on PS1. And then they took that and said, what if I made a kart racer out of this, actually? And it's very funny, it's very goofy. I had fun with it, but it is pretty, once again, small in scope and kind of janky, which you'd expect out of it, but like it is a fun thing for what it is, but it's not as good a kart racer as like the Mario Karts or Diddy Kong Racings of the past, And so while it is fun and it is doing its own little goofy thing, it is such a small little thing that I don't think it needs to be much higher.
That's fair. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, we can put it there. I mean, it's one of your games.
Yeah.
So I can't really say a lot about it. I didn't play it. I'm aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has a very funny history. But yeah, that seems like an alright pick for down here near the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So we cut Pal World, Odata, Web Fishing, Nightmare Cart. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I think that next has to be Pokemon TCG Pocket.
Okay. Yeah, I was avoiding that one a little bit just because I know that opening packs can be fun.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the crux of it, right? It's literally just like a booster pack simulator, and that's maybe selling a little short. There's a lot of good polish. The interface is very satisfying. I think that they kind of nailed the fun of what collecting is in the form of an app, and that's dangerous. I've been playing it for like a week and a half. The way that it works is you just wait. It's a waiting simulator. It's an exercise in patience unless you want to put money into it, where like every 12 hours you're allowed to open a booster pack. And there is actually the game aspect of it exists in the trading as well. You can play, it's like a condensed form of what the actual trading card game is like. So it's a lot quicker, a lot more easy to commit to on the toilet, which is basically what I've been doing. But the thing is, it's nothing new. It ain't nothing particularly special. It's just really nice presentation and the dopamine that comes with opening something and finding out what you got. So, not gonna make it much farther. I think that's the good place to cut it.
Fair.
Do you have something ready for the chopping block, Neil?
So I have a question.
Okay.
In the past, we have had some feelings about whether something is a remake or more of a remaster. And so I'm wondering about Riven 2024. Just
okay,
where on the scale of like remake?
Very much remaster. Very much. Well, okay. It's pretty remake actually.
Okay.
So here's the problem, Neil. I didn't get through all of the original Riven.
Mm-hmm.
It was simply too old. And that's which is why when I heard about the remake, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I want to play Riven. I just don't want to play Riven, you know?
Sure.
And um it's good. I actually looked up that a lot of the puzzles had to be changed for lots of different reasons. And so it isn't exactly the same game, and it is very much like built from the ground up to be, what Riven was, but modern.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to put that up for the block then. I just needed to know that piece because of some of our conversations in past years.
No, absolutely.
Instead, I think I'm going to put Peglin up.
You gonna put Peglin up?
Yeah. I like Peglin a lot. I think it is a very fun Peggle style game. But for the kind of rogue like bits of it and the moving through these levels, it ends up feeling a little bit sparse in how many different levels there are to actually get through on any given run. So while you could go for like high score hunting with all the different levels in like a normal Peggle game, you don't really have that going on with Peglin, and so it sort of dried up a little faster than I was hoping it would, especially for a rogue-like style game.
Okay. Can I offer you something in return, and we'll keep Peglin for a little bit?
Okay, yeah.
And this is not specifically out of my personal love for Peglin, but rather, we were in a spot where we were eliminating short, little, fun experience games.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I didn't talk about Duranko Wonko, but Duranko Wonko is a game much in the spirit of like Katamari, where instead of rolling things up, you play as a little Pomeranian dog and you make a giant mess.
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of dropped into like this little house setting, and you can interact with all the objects, and the goal is just to like cover the house in filth. And it was a free game. I don't remember where I heard about it, but I was like, oh, free, that's all. I'm all about free.
Uh-huh.
And I played it in one sitting, and I was like, that was fun. And then I kind of didn't think about it ever again. So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it was a
think that-
one-sitting game and you never thought about it again, that usually says to me maybe it doesn't need to be very high.
I think that the reason this is not below Celeste 64 is because Celeste 64 is very openly like just a fun little thing, you know. They were like, "Oh, we're not planning on making a full game like this. This is just like a little bonus fun thing that we did." Duranko Wonko, I feel like had it a little bit more going on, it could be considered a full game.
Okay.
And also, I don't know anything about the publisher. Maybe I do, and I just don't remember who the publisher is. But I feel like, this was something that they sat down, they worked on, and they're like, okay. It wasn't like an afterthought. It wasn't like a fun little spin-off thing. It was its own thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put Duranko Wonko on the chopping block. It's up to you whether or not you want to take that.
I'll take it.
Okay.
I think that puts you up instead.
Let me look at this list really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How we feeling about Pinball Spire? I know that it was a short experience, shorter than you expected.
It was. Pinball Spire is not something I was planning to go much further with.
Okay. I think that I kind of have a group of games here. Okay. Let me talk about the group of games.
Sure.
Peglin, Ember Ward, Shogun Showdown, I would say, is in this spot, and then Pinball Spire. I think these are kind of like in any order. These things. That's what I'm kind of aiming to like get rid of.
Tell me a little bit about Ember Ward. I don't know much about.
I didn't talk about Ember Ward on the podcast, so I guess now's a good time to talk about it. So it's a tower defense game, but it's a roguelite tower defense game where you draft your towers, which is not that abnormal, but you also draft pieces of a maze.
Oh.
So in some TDs, tower defense games, mazing the creeps is a big deal, is basically what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
You maze the creeps to, like, extend the path that they have to take through your little labyrinth in order to maximize the amount of time that they are being shot at. And Ember Ward accomplishes this by giving you Tetris pieces, essentially. And the Tetris pieces are on which you place your towers, and sometimes they have little augmentation spaces on them that improve your towers if you place the towers on those particular spaces. And it's fun, it's dynamic. It came out into 1.0, I believe, this year, and, you know, I had fun with it, but it wasn't the kind of game where, like, I played, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get back to that. It was kind of the game where, like, I don't know what else to play.
Sure.
I'll just go ahead and turn this on. So, and that's kind of the same feeling I have for, like, Peglin.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same feeling I have for Shogun Showdown. And I imagine, you know, Pinball Spire, I think, is a little bit rougher, and the reason I bring it up is because I know that there's no roguelite element to, like, bring you back to it, right?
Yeah. Pinball Spire is in kind of an interesting spot for me because as we all know, I like pinball shit a lot. So it gets a couple extra points for that. But when I finished that game, I thought I was halfway through it. And that ends up making the last moment of that game feel like a pretty big letdown. So
you hate to go out
I
on
wasn't
a
going to
whistle.
have it go much further either way, if that's what you wanted to look for at this point.
It's just, I don't think that it has the staying power to justify it
Mm-hmm.
sitting around much longer. And again, it's your game. I didn't play it. I played the demo, and I thought, oh, this is fun, and Neil's gonna play this. That's what I got from the demo.
And I did.
And you did. So, I mean, it's up to you. Again, I have several other items on available in the vending machine here to drop out.
I mean,
we both played Peglin.
I
don't know if you played Shogun Showdown.
Like, I personally, overall, think I'm happier with Pinball Spire than Peglin. But I agree Peglin has more... Like, you can spend more time with Peglin.
All right, well, let's do the Audio Games Game of the Year Classic, and we'll do a twofer. All right, we'll do Peglin, Pinball Spire, and you pick the order.
All right, I'm going to put Pinball Spire above Peglin.
Okay. Absolutely fine by me.
All right.
I think that next is going to be Ember Ward.
All right.
And again, I think that it's a great roguelike game. Conceptually, you know, it's taking a bunch of elements that already exist and iterating on it in a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in scope, because it's building on things that already exist, it's hard to really want to push it further because it's not particularly innovative in the elements themselves more than how you're playing with them. I think that Shogun Showdown is ultimately more unique.
Mm-hmm.
And I did talk about it a little bit on the podcast, but it's very much a positionally based roguelite, where if you think of like Darkest Dungeon, you know, your placement is very, very important. And then you don't draft a deck, but you draft tiles, which represent your weapons. And there's also like different characters. There's a lot going on there. And it's kind of its own thing. You know, I know that I can cite Darkest Dungeon, but that's only because I lack the vocabulary to talk about it in a more elegant way.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very unique experience. It's just, I feel like I got my fill of it, and you know, I played like 3 characters all the way through to the end and beat the game 3 times, and I haven't been super compelled to go back to it. I mean, I might go back to it after a while, but we live in a world with so many roguelike games, Neil.
We do. They have become quite popular. There's still, 5 on our list at least?
And don't get me wrong, I have my comfort games, okay? I have my games from like 5 years ago that I still pop open. I'm like, let me do a run of that real quick.
Slay the Spire will never get uninstalled for that reason.
Well, I mean, when Slay the Spire 2 comes out, I don't know if I'll be playing much Slay the Spire.
Fair.
But I don't think that Shogun Showdown is a game that I'm going to be like, oh man, I'd really like to go do a run of that. I feel
Okay.
like I kind of understand what it was trying to be. I appreciate it for what it was, but I don't think there's much potential for me to be going back to that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on top, and I'll hand it back to you.
All right. So we just sort of did 4 in a row there. Pretty
Yeah, we could.
quick.
Well, okay. It's always like this. There's easy ones to cut,
Oh,
and
I
there's hard
know.
ones to cut, and it's always at the end that's hard.
I know. And we're definitely starting to get a little closer to where I'm going like, how like I've been spending a lot of time with Marvel Rivals, but do I like it that much? Hmm.
I mean, if you
I
want to talk about it, we can do a little interlude here and talk about Marvel Rivals and see where
No,
get a
I
feel
think
for it.
I would want it above at least one or two other games that I can see right here.
Let's
Um,
talk.
so I'm going to instead ask you about Poke Rogue because I don't remember which one that is.
Poke Rogue is basically the web-based Pokemon game where you you have the starter Pokemon available from the very beginning, and then as you play through the game, you are awarded egg vouchers, and you can unlock other Pokemon to start the game with. But like they have all the moves that you would expect leveling up as in Pokemon, all of like the different nuances of Pokemon, but just played much more quickly,
Mm,
focusing on the battle aspect. It has all the held items. You can get TMs and teach them alternate moves as you go along. You do both wild battles where you can catch the Pokemon and add them to your team. And you have trainer battles where you get money and you get to have an item pick between each battle.
mm-hmm.
It was a very addictive, fast-paced, distilled Pokemon game that focused on the aspects that I find most interesting about Pokemon.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and I was very addicted to that game for like a couple months around the time I was moving. And it was very easy for me to pick up and play because it was web based.
Yeah,
And I think that it deserves to go a little further.
that's fair. That's fair. And can you remind me about Ballionaire?
Ballionaire is a fairly recent game. I played the demo on the Next Fest
Mm-hmm.
on Steam, and it's basically you build a pachinko machine by drafting the different bouncers and parts that go into
Right.
it.
Yes. 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 Okay. Okay.
And that is also fun, and I understand why you would kind of like look at it and be like, does it belong here? But I also think that it deserves to go a little
No,
further.
that's fair. That's fair. Um. All right. I've tried Celeste 64 a few times. Do you think it should go further?
I think now is a good time.
Okay. I'm gonna do Celeste 64 here.
Okay.
I really liked Celeste 64. It is a really cool small experience. It also has a few bits that are a little bit like holy shit. This game is maybe there's a reason why Celeste was a 2D game. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But as a really small, just like, hey, Celeste came out like 10 years ago or whatever, and this is really fucking like this is kind of a not exactly homage, but like a re-exploration of some of those feelings at the time, and where we are today. Like that stuff is really neat to get
It's
that
a
kind
it's
of
an
window into the developers.
Yeah, it's kind of both an in character and out of character look back on Celeste.
Yeah.
And I really, really appreciate that. I think that there's a very fine line to walk when you go back and revisit something like Celeste because there's a lot of feelings involved. There's a lot of history both in the game and outside of the game. And they approached it so elegantly. I think they did a really great job with what they did. I think that if they sat down like, let's make Celeste 2, that's asking for trouble, because
Totally.
we have these stories and these characters who feel more or less complete. They added some stuff to Celeste that really rounded things up, I think, very well, and maybe addressed some things that people were curious about.
Mm-hmm.
So when you decide I'm going to tag something onto the end of this, it's difficult, and they did a very good job.
They really did. They really did. But that's mine for this one. You're up.
Okay. I am going to put out. I'm gonna do Infinite Craft.
Okay.
So if you're not aware, Infinite Craft was another browser-based game made by a guy named Neil, who's known for his website Neil.fun. Um, and the reason that Infinite Craft is all the way up here when it's a web-based game is not because it's particularly like amazing gameplay or necessarily innovative design. It's because this is a what I would consider a use case for AI that is not destructive for the industry. And the thing that was going on with Infinite Craft was basically Neil was like, hey, I'm going to make one of those combining games, but like you can literally combine anything, and then using an AI on the back end, it's going to determine what it actually becomes. So you start with the basic elements, fire, water, air, earth, and you can basically make anything. Like literally, people have found ways to like make things as esoteric as like, you know, you can make Captain Hook. You can make
Okay.
Dairy Queen.
Sure.
You can make Andromeda Galaxy. And it all just is because you're combining words. And the other thing is like he lost money running this game because it cost so much to run the servers when it was at its peak popularity that he like posts like I'm like losing $20,000 a month running this shit.
Jesus.
And in a way it's almost like a tribute to him to have it go along this far because like not only did you make this interesting thing that is an actual use case for AI, but you also put your own fucking money behind it because people were enjoying it. And I gotta appreciate that. So, nothing but respect. Infinite Craft can go now.
All right. Well, I think I gotta get rid of Still Wakes the Deep next.
Well, okay. So Still Wakes the Deep.
Yeah.
Horror game.
Mm-hmm.
And Eldritch on an oil rig, if I remember correctly.
Correct. This is all correct.
Okay. So why is it not going further, Neil?
So, Still Wakes the Deep is really, really good at making the setting of the oil rig and kind of putting together a fairly decent horror story. And I mean that more in the way that a lot of horror movies will really be using the monster more as a representation of what's going on in their life, and they very much are going down that path for this game. And I think they succeed in a lot of ways. The problem is, the game itself is barely more than a walking simulator, and while it does have a few moments that succeed in being scary, not as many of them as I was kind of hoping for. So while the story is pretty decent and everything, I just have a hard time really feeling like it was an amazing game. And especially as a horror game, it just didn't quite get there enough for me to put it up there in a higher tier, at least to me, unless you are like, oh, actually, here's a thing you really liked about it. It just doesn't really make it past the mid section here for me.
Okay. I mean, I didn't play it. I saw one other person play it, but I mean, I think that the difficult thing is you say that you weren't that scared by it, but I think that that's, you know, a matter of taste.
I guess so.
You know, people don't really choose what they're afraid of, and I think that body horror is very unsettling for other people, but maybe we're just over it.
Honestly, the parts of the game that scared or felt the most tense for me were actually the parts where you seem to have a like actual danger of drowning.
Yeah.
And those are so rarely implemented despite you being on a sinking oil rig in the middle of the ocean. Like that kind of felt to me more like that is a thing that should feel a little more ever present and scary, and doesn't come up as much as I would have expected it to.
And I do remember talking about like there are like chases, but when you die during a chase, it takes the wind out of it
Yeah.
completely.
And that's a
And it's
problem
like,
with
well,
all horror games. Like I don't want to put too much blame on Still Wakes the Deep, but yeah.
well, I mean, it was a choice to use that as a mechanic. But
Totally.
yeah, I don't want to say that it's merely a problem with Still Wakes the Deep, but it is a trope
Yeah.
that continues to get used. Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Cool.
Neil,
Mm-hmm.
Zenless Zone Zero is a gacha game.
This is one of the pieces I'm saying we might have a little bit of a fight about.
Neil,
Uh-huh.
Zenless Zone Zero is a gacha game.
I know.
Here's the problem. Okay, so when we talk about games that are released
Mm-hmm.
this year, how are we handling that? Are we allowing it to be including all of the updates that ran since? Or are we talking about the game at its state when it released?
I think anything released this year is fair game.
Okay, so anything that's
Or
come
in
out.
2024. Anything coming up doesn't matter.
Okay, well, even so. Give me your argument for Zenless Zone Zero going further.
All right. Zenless Zone Zero is a gacha game. I do have problems with the monetary stuff that game is trying to do and the way that it does definitely want you to spend money. I have found that it hasn't really gotten in the way for me in this game, and I haven't played a lot of gacha games, but the other few I have, I felt like I hit those walls and got more
skill
frustrated
issue
with
to be
them.
honest, but yeah, sure.
much worse. But the thing that Zenless Zone Zero really has going for me, and why I need it to go farther, is, if nothing else, this is my most played game this year.
Okay, but it's a gacha game. It
Yes.
enforces you playing it every day.
It
I play
definitely
Genshin
wants
every
you
day,
to.
Neil.
It definitely wants you to, but I have spent a bunch of time playing this game that I didn't need to. Because I do find that while it's not like the most crazy action game like Neo or something where you're really getting in there and have a lot of depth, the team building,
Okay.
the general
Neil.
way that the game plays, I just like it.
Neil,
Mhm.
we can't. It being your comfort game cannot mean that it's a good game, okay?
I think it's a pretty good game. I think it starts really bad.
All right, well, okay. Let me ask you this. How's the story?
It gets way better.
It gets way better.
Like, that first day, that first bunch, I was really not into it. Second
And you're not just having, like,
the second
you're
chapter,
not just having,
they
like,
give
weird
you some
Helsinki
characters
withdrawals.
No, go ahead.
You're not just having weird Helsinki syndrome withdrawals because it's have you captive that you're trying to justify that it's good.
No. But
All
I
right.
think it's interesting. So, first chapter, pretty boring, not that very good. Second chapter, they get some more characters that are a little more interesting. And at the end of the third chapter, they finally give you like an actual hint about your proxy, like the characters you are rather than the characters you're using. They give you some information about them, and that gives you some information about the post-apocalyptic world that this game is inhabiting. And the chapters 4 and 5 both expand on that in ways that I'm pretty interested to see where the actual story part of that, or world building at least, goes.
Okay, well, all right. I have problems with the gameplay for that game. Apparently that they've changed a lot of things since I last played. I will also say that they are emailing me constantly asking me to come back and play this game.
I'm surprised.
And I know that they've also given a lot of incentives for people to be playing it. They've been generous, let's say.
So here's something I will say. While Zenless Zone Zero is very high on my personal list, I'm hoping we put it at number 10.
At 10? I think that's...
If you don't want it to be in the top 10, can we at least give it 11?
Well, let's think about this. This is a list that we're going through, Neil.
Mhm.
Okay? I did not think in any universe you'd ever be defending a gacha game to get to the top 10. All right, let's put that out of the
Yep,
side.
I
Okay?
know. This is a fucking weird year we're in.
But give me something else then.
Okay.
What are you thinking deserves to go in its place?
Right now at this point, I'm looking at the feelings you told me about Echoes of Wisdom, because you were pretty mediocre on that game. And I'm looking at my own
Yeah.
feelings on Neva.
Oh, okay. What are we at? Like, what position is this?
Let's
Do
see.
you know?
We're at what do we have left? 17. This would be we have 17 left, so this would be 17th. That's how math works.
That is how math works. Let's put Poke Rogue here. I'm willing to cut Poke Rogue here. It is an addictive game. It's small in its scope, but it does it so well. It brings everything from the actual mechanics of Pokemon into that space. It's 2D, you know, they don't have the 3D models, but they bothered to make 2D models for the 3D Pokemon who have never been in 2D. You know, there was a lot of heart that went into it. I know that there was some development issues with the team, and some people had left. I don't really know what state it's in right now because I have not played it in a long time. But I probably put at least 50 hours into that stupid app game.
That is quite a bit.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of fun systems. It does have its own gacha element with the egg vouchers and seeing what Pokemon you get. Very fun. I do recommend it if you enjoy Pokemon. It made me care about Pokemon, and it made me learn Pokemon that I didn't know about, and not many things in the Pokemon franchise that are by the actual producers of Pokemon have done that. So, again, love the game, but it is exactly what it is. There's nothing particularly profound about it. All the things were kind of sitting there waiting to be assembled in this way. So I can let this go.
Okay.
I'm gonna put Poke Rogue at 17.
Fair. Okay. 16, huh?
16.
Because I know you had some pretty good feelings early on. Where are your feelings at in Indiana Jones at this point?
Good.
Very good. Okay.
I think that, listen, Neil, I've despised what AAA games have become. This has been exceptional to that.
Okay. That's it for now. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
I just needed to know, like, a general barometer.
I think that looking at this, this has to be, like, maybe one of 2 AAA games on this list.
Yeah, we together did not play all that many AAA games this year.
I think that there's some AA games on here. Don't get me wrong.
I did play a fair number of AAA games this year, but they weren't from this year. That's the problem. Like, I played Alan Wake 2 and stuff from last year, right? Which I can't qualify on here.
Nope, can't do it.
Even though I like it.
It already got enough accolades. Listen, Alan Wake 2 already won enough fucking awards.
Look, it wouldn't have been my game of the year last year either. I just liked it a lot.
Okay.
So I'm hoping you liked this game a lot because I gave it to you. But what are your feelings on I Am Your Beast?
It's top 10. It's got to be top.
Okay. I realized how much you enjoy Neon White, and I was like, this might have some Neon White to it.
Yes. It doesn't have just some Neon White to it, but we'll get to that.
Okay. I think what I'm going to try for here at this point then is I got to hear your argument about Echoes of Wisdom because you seemed pretty lukewarm on it when you were playing it.
Yeah, I was, and I didn't get around to finishing it. Echoes of Wisdom, I think that it's just kind of disappointing in the sense that they finally decided to give Zelda her own game, and it's it's kind of just gameplay wise, and this is maybe a me problem, but when you figure out what works, you kind of just do what works. I don't have enough curiosity or, I guess, game time to allow myself to be creative in the way that I solve my problems. And so when I received certain elements in Echoes of Wisdom, it just became, water block the game. It became moving tile the game. It became bed 5 times the game. And it's not that the game is without its own charm. I think that it does a lot to bring some very weird lore. And I appreciate it being weird. But at the same time, it's very clear that this was kind of like a B-team project. And it was like, we need another Zelda game on our list before we move on to the next console, because it'll look bad if we don't have at least, one more. And, that's not to fault what it is. It's a fun 2D top-down Zelda game in a time where that felt like they weren't going to ever do that again. And I know every time they put out a 2D top-down Zelda game, we're like, oh, wow, this is going to be the last one. They have all these like really big open-world Zelda games now. Like, how can they possibly justify this? And unfortunately, Echoes of Wisdom is kind of a case in point for why they can't do that. Because they're trying to do the open-world formula using different gameplay mechanics and a different kind of system. And it works to a point, and then it doesn't work. So, am I ready to cut it? I think that there's a couple other things I can go first.
Okay.
But, if there isn't anything else that you want to, I'm not going to bemoan that. I'm not going to, leave in tears.
What would you suggest other than Echoes of Wisdom that's not Zenless Zone Zero?
You're really pushing for Zenless Zone Zero. Harold Halibut, probably.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about Harold Halibut, because all I know is it's apparently fucking crazy.
Okay, so Harold Halibut, it's one of those games where it's, I hate to source this quote, but it insists upon itself. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's kind of artsy fartsy to the point where, like, it's hard to ignore how artsy it's trying to be. And that's not a bad thing. I think that it pulls it off a lot of the time. But it's very unique visually. I don't think I've ever seen a game quite like this. It feels very naturally kind of claymation stop motion. I think that it has a very heartfelt story with a lot of interesting things to say, but boy, does it meander. So okay. I don't know how long people have been listening to the podcast, but I would describe it as a Pentiment style game, in the sense that, like, it is verbose to the point of not being particularly respectful of the time I'm putting into it. And
that makes sense.
That, it's difficult. I feel like they wanted to take the medium of stop motion, of this, like, style into the video game world, and they were still way too focused on the cinematic aspect of what they were doing. And if this were a film, I think that would be a very excellent film,
Sure.
But some of the gameplay feels tacked on, and most of the gameplay is, interacting with characters, and it's just difficult to remember everything. Like, you have to remember all the characters' names, and you have to develop an attachment to them in order to, like, build up the endurance to get through it. And I think that this would be a game that I would be comfortable cutting here. I think that the thing that's stopping this from being in a top 10 game is because it excels in some ways and is lacking in others.
Mm-hmm.
And it rounds out to being a good game, but not an excellent game. So I would be comfortable with letting Harold Halibut go here. This is kind of like the weird gray area where I can think of other games also going. And I'm just kind of focused on the ones I'm trying to get to the finish point at this point.
Yeah, so
Harold Halibut.
To pull this back for both of us here, those top 3, UFO 50, Animal Well, Balatro, I don't think either of us are going to try to take off the top 10.
Yeah, I think that those all deserve to be in the top
Like,
three.
I expect those to be in the
Frankly,
top 10 at the very least. On my side, with like the few games that only I played left, there's really only one that I am trying to make sure makes it pretty high.
yeah, Zenless Zone Zero.
No. Zenless Zone Zero I want top 10, but that's not the one I'm trying to get like up there. Um
What a catastrophe it is that I'm willing to let Harold Halibut go and let Zenless Zone Zero surpass it.
I look I know I if you had told me that I was going to actually like Zenless Zone Zero anywhere near as much as I do, I would have called you a liar before it came out too.
Listen, I'm just gonna say right now, I'm gonna be checking up on you with Zenless Zone Zero
Yeah?
because if you are the same as any other gotcha game player, give it a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and you're gonna be like, I'm so tired of this fucking game.
I mean that's true of most
Because,
games. But think about
but
how
here's
long
the
I
thing,
played fucking
right? But they're wheeling you along here, Neil. You
mhm,
don't understand. Like, yes, the story's interesting now, but if they have enough concurrent players, they're gonna draw that shit out.
totally. Once they get to the point where I'm going like, can we just resolve something, please? No, I hear you. I hear you. Honestly,
But you're not
the
there
chapter
now.
5 thing resolved something to a point where I was kind of surprised that they even went that far this year. So
You know,
we're not talking about Zenless Zone. It's fine. It's fine.
we are. We have to. It's inevitable. We have to talk about Zenless Zone
we
Zero.
will, but not yet. Not yet. There's
Yeah, we right now, Neil. We gotta talk about it now.
Let's talk about Neva.
Wow. Okay, you're gonna throw your other game out there. Okay.
I'm not
All right.
I'm not as that big on Neva. So Neva's by the same people as Gris from a few years back, and I don't remember how high I put Gris on my personal list back then, but
Okay. Before you go on,
mhm.
does it insist upon itself?
What do you mean by insist upon itself in that way?
Like, is it artsy fartsy to the point of like, it's hard to ignore how artsy fartsy it is?
Yes,
Okay.
it's very artsy.
I think here's the thing, Neil. Before we even do anything else, I think that it's probably more of a game than Harold Halibut.
Okay, so we're cutting Harold
Let's cut
Halibut here
Harold.
then.
Let's cut a Harold
Okay,
Halibut.
okay. Then Harold Halibut's out, and it's your turn.
Zenless Zone Zero.
No. I'll put Neva up instead.
Let's let's talk about this. You said we have to talk about this,
Uh-huh.
and now's the time.
All right.
Why, Neil?
I
Why do you have a waifu?
have
Are you looking
like
at one of these
12,
characters I love? Okay,
because that's what the game
like-
is about, is collecting them.
but like, is there a character where you saw their characters and like, oh, now I care too deeply about this character, and you're thinking about her. You're saying all these things, but behind your mouth, in your brain, you're thinking about this character, and you're like, I want to get you to spot number 10.
No,
Because I love
there's
you.
not a specific waifu that has me doing that, unless we want to say I just love Wolfman, even though he's not the most
It's a
fun
bit.
to use.
He's pretty well. I don't know. It's been a while since I played.
He's
I
like
had him.
bondage wolf guy. He's hot.
It's been a lonely year, Neil.
It
Okay,
has.
let's just be honest.
It's been a very lonely year. That's why.
Which is why we have to be honest with ourselves and cut Zenless Zone Zero here.
No. It's been a lonely year, and that's why a different game on my list is going to go way higher than Zenless Zone Zero.
Okay, well, all right. Let's go ahead and talk about. Well, you want to put Neva up. But tell me why Neva doesn't belong to
All right.
farther along.
Neva is very artsy. It's very beautiful to look at. It also is, while there's more game there than their first game, Grease, in that there's actual combat in this game, so you're doing more than just moving left and right and jumping sometimes. It is still a game that is very, very kind of there just to be visually appealing.
So you think that like it was the gameplay was an afterthought for the sake of putting the stuff on display?
For the most part, yeah. There's a
Okay.
little bit more there than some other games, but really this thing is here for you to get, a little bit emotionally attached to the dog, to show you some pretty visuals, and have a cool few bits of like moving through the seasons and seeing how the environment changes each time the season does. But
Okay.
while it is a very cool game and has some very striking visuals and like I enjoyed it, I'm not trying to say it's bad. It's not something that has me going like, oh, and they managed to tell such an emotional story. Like, it's a melancholy story. The ending is good. It's not wildly affecting.
Okay. I think this is a good time to maybe step back a little bit and talk about what we're trying to push in terms of what we want to win,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're addressing some games right now that excel at certain things and are deficient in others. And the qualities that I'm looking for in terms of what makes a good game for Game of the Year are scope.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you are kind of doing the same thing throughout the entire gameplay loop, then you can't really justify being in top 10. Also, innovation. Like, what is it doing that's new to the medium, right? And that's basically it. And I think that anything else is kind of like just frosting on the cake. And visually, I look at a game like Neva and I'm like, this is very beautiful, but how does that actually impact my desire to play through it again, right?
Not at all.
Is it pretty enough? Right. So, are there games that are pretty enough that I do want to experience them again? Yes. Is Neva one of those for Neil?
No.
Then I think that it's fair to cut it here.
All right.
So we'll go ahead and cut that one.
Whose turn are we on? I think that might have technically been your
Um,
turn.
Well, I let you swap out Zone Zero yet
yeah.
again.
And we're
So I
gonna
guess
see
it
if
is
we
my turn,
can
isn't it?
keep that going. We haven't talked
let's
about
see.
Unicorn Overlord at all yet.
No, that's top 10.
Is it? Really?
It is. Yeah.
I am surprised. You are like the only person I've heard talk about it this entire year.
It did get a nomination at the Game Awards.
I guess so. Okay.
It sucks that I'm the only one you heard it from, okay?
Yeah.
And that only hardens me in my position that it deserves the fucking award.
I think
to be in the
part
top 10.
of me, you being the only one who I heard about it from, is because it got overshadowed by things like Metaphor ReFantazio and yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I would say that because Unicorn Overlord came like very middle this year, and Metaphor came late. Like, there was a period where people should have been playing Unicorn Overlord, and I do think a large part of it is the unfortunate name they decided to go with.
Fair.
Okay.
Okay. So here's what I'm gonna try then. Is
All
this
right.
where we do Riven? Because yes, you did say they remade a lot of the puzzles and stuff. It is still a remake.
Yes, it is a remake.
Is it a remake good enough for top 10?
I think that I'd rather put Billionaire instead.
Okay.
But ultimately, I think that Zenless Zone Zero deserves to be in this
I know
spot.
you do, but I'm gonna keep pushing.
Why?
And I genuinely am shocked at how much I enjoy and play that game.
Yep, not as much as me.
I don't talk about it on our podcast very much because
If you are that shocked by how much you like it, then you would cut it right here.
no, because I like it that much.
Because your shock is your instinct telling you it does not belong further along.
No.
You have a problem, Neil.
Maybe.
Well, okay.
Look,
let's
I'm
see.
not like spending a bunch of money in the game. I'm fine. I haven't collected
No,
every
you're-
single character. I'm not like
Neil, remember, time is money. Okay?
Well,
And if you're playing that every day or nearly every day, you're going to work.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's work I enjoy, unlike an actual job.
Okay. All right. Let's cut Billionaire.
Okay, okay. You're putting Billionaire up
Billionaire.
instead there. That's fine by me.
So Billionaire is one of those games that I would put under innovative. It's not that pachinko is a new concept, but the way they go about it is very unique, and it's just very satisfying to watch. Your fun pachinko ball bearing go down and bump on the things that you placed in a very elegant way. There, you'd think that with the randomness of what's involved, that there wouldn't be any strategy, but you quickly learn otherwise. Like you can manipulate things in very interesting ways and have them interact with one another. Is there a slight recency bias here, and maybe it belonged a little lower? Maybe,
Mm,
but I did spend more time with this for how late in the year that it's come out. That I think that, like, when I look at the other roguelike games, I look at Ember Ward, I look at Peglin, I look at Shogun Shogun, and I'm like, I played Billionaire a lot more than those. So, just in general satisfaction with what it is,
mm-hmm.
intrigue, again, innovation, it's good, but the scope is lacking. You know, it is what it is. So, now's the time to cut Billionaire.
Okay. Uh, your turn.
Yeah, how about Zenless Zone Zero?
I'd prefer if we didn't.
I know your preference, Neil.
I would rather do. I've already said Echoes of Wisdom, but we got to put some. If I'm offering something up instead of Zenless Zone Zero, it's got to be something I played. Marvel Rivals.
Okay. Marvel Rivals is an interesting one.
I played a shitload of that over the last couple weeks. But it's not innovative. It's fucking
No.
Overwatch. It's got a pretty. It's just the loop it is. It's fucking Overwatch matches. It's good. I'm having fun. I'm surprised at how well it is succeeding, considering how much I dropped off of Overwatch years ago at this point.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my time that I spent in Overwatch, like especially at the very beginning, I felt a certain kind of polish that just feels absent in Rivals.
That's fair.
I think Rivals, it just feels like it's not tuned.
I can see that. Overwatch felt wildly well tuned for the launch.
So well tuned that they failed to find a way to make a sequel to it.
Yeah.
So I see the potential of Rivals. I see the appeal of the franchise. I think that it also has done a good job of maybe bringing in some less popular characters and doing interesting things with them. But you know, it's a hero shooter.
It's a hero shooter.
And it don't feel particularly polished. So in terms of the scope, we know what we're getting. In terms of innovation, you know, there's some particular things that they tried to do, like the team up stuff. I think, unfortunately, like the innovation that is there is the part that makes it feel less polished. So I think I would be fine with cutting it there.
Cool. Shoot, we're back to me. And I know what you want.
Well, it doesn't matter what I want, you're picking.
I know. See, this is so hard because
it's mostly my shit.
It's mostly your shit, but also because, like, even if I was saying, like, what are the 5 games I want in the top 10? 3 of them are stuff that both of us liked a lot, and 4 of them are things we both played.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another reason why I'm really gunning to get Zenless Zone Zero at number 10. I
played Zenless Zone Zero. Now.
I know you did.
Okay.
That's why it should go to 10 because we both played it. It's a
No,
group
I
list, combo list.
no, because I played it, I can definitively say it does not belong in the top 10.
They've only made improvements. Quality of life, it's fine. Um, I mean, I'm again looking at Echoes of Wisdom because you're pretty lukewarm on that, and I'm very high on Zenless Zone Zero.
All right. Yeah, that's got to go. Echoes of Wisdom has to get cut. I think that they had a lot of good ideas with what they're doing. The execution was lacking. So, we'll leave it at that. You can save your Zenless Zone Zero for another. I hate having to say it every single time, too. Zenless
Just
Zone
say
Zero.
ZZZ, it's fine.
That's also terrible.
Fair.
But okay.
All right, so we are at 11. This is going to be the number 11.
Right,
that
so
you're
Zenless
picking.
Zone Zero, right?
I would really prefer it not to be Zenless Zone Zero.
What's your substitute then?
As much as I hate to say it, because really I want to say Riven, but I would put Nine Souls simply because I am so early in that game still. I can't, in good conscience, actually put it into the top 10.
Well, I think that for the same reason you should put Zenless Zone Zero at 11 because you're never going to finish it.
I hear what you're saying, but they are very different games going for very different things, and I think that...
Yeah, one is trying to get you to play eternally and take your money.
Yes.
That's what... if you want to talk about what they're trying to do, that's what that game's trying to do.
I hear you. I do feel kind of weird putting a game that only one of us has gotten maybe 25% into on our top 10. Like, talk about recency bias, talk about all that kind of stuff. Currently playing and not that far into feels rough for me to putting into our top 10.
I think that there's... I mean, the three that I think are going to be at the top, we've played all the way through, or at least in the sense that there's not much more to do with those games. Mm-hmm. I also have games that are not nearly finished, so that's a thing. Unfortunately, we only have so much time in our lives to be dedicating to completing games. But
I mean, really, then if you don't want to do Nine Souls, then I would really be looking for Riven because it's a remake, and that just always puts a bit of a damper for things on for me in general.
Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about what it means to have a remake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have games that are like PlayStation era that get remade, like Final Fantasy VII. And by merit of them being made modern, they're essentially different games. Like, even without the crazy, weird story stuff going on in Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's essentially a different game. It's not the same game that it was. It is a tribute to what it was formerly. And then you have remakes for games like Last of Us, and it's like, that game fucking came out 3 years ago. Why are you remaking this shit?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Riven is more of the former than the latter. And Riven is an old game, Neil.
It is.
Myst is literally the first CD-ROM game.
Mm-hmm.
And it launched the medium of CD-ROM. And Riven is the sequel to that.
Yes.
Okay? So, it's old. It needed a remake. And the remake makes it transformative. It's transformative. The act of remaking Riven is transformative.
Okay. Is it... Like, a lot of times what I look at right now is I look at the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I look at the Resident Evil 4 remake.
Okay.
Because 2 is like, they really remade that game.
2 needed a remake in the sense that, like, just the gameplay wasn't up to snuff.
Totally. And...
that was a transformative remake.
And the 4 remake, they... changed the way they added knife parrying and shit. They changed the way that a lot of the escort mission stuff of going through that game works. Like, they did a lot to that game as well, but that game is still very much Resident Evil 4 while the Resident Evil 2 remake is a brand new Resident Evil 2 game.
I don't know if I agree with that,
Really?
but well, like Resident Evil 4, had a lot more of the groundwork done for them to like just drop the remake over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Resident Evil 2 did and didn't. It's not like it's not a one-to-one, like it's not the same scale as what the original Resident Evil 2 was, but the layout is essentially the same, like room to room, like they have the same rooms.
Sure.
They played it out a little differently, but it is very much taking the framework of what 2 was and making it modern. Whereas Resident Evil 4 was kind of like the thing that changed Resident Evil to what it is now. Well, not necessarily, like they've also curbed a little bit on that, but
Mm-hmm.
into that era of what was considered modern, Resident Evil 4 was definitive of that. And so the idea of making that modern was kind of like a weird concept, right?
Yeah.
People were like, Resident Evil 4 didn't really need a remake, but then they did, and people were like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually good.
Totally. But for me, what I'm saying is like that Resident Evil 2 remake, I don't have the same qualms about, whereas the Resident Evil 4 remake, I'm a little bit like, yeah, it's very good, but like it's losing a couple points for me. Just from
Because
the
it's a
remake
remake.
status.
Well, I think that's kind of a bias, isn't it?
A little bit. I do have a little bit of a bias about remakes.
Well, I have a bias against gacha games getting into the top 10, so Zenless Zone Zero
Mm-hmm.
is gonna go now.
I really don't want it to. I really want it to get in as number 10.
But why? Think about that, Neil. Why is it important for Zenless Zone Zero to be in top 10?
Because
Why?
I genuinely enjoy the time I spent with that game.
Are you saying that you didn't with everything else? That's already been cut.
I'm saying
you genuinely
that
enjoy the time with those games.
I'm saying that this year I don't have a huge amount of passion for most of the games I played, Zenless Zone Zero included. But
Okay, let's talk about
But
let's explore that.
Zenless
Actually,
Zone
you said you
Zero,
didn't have a
out
lot
of
of
all of
passion.
my games is surprisingly
Why is this
high.
coming out now, though?
Hmm?
Let's talk about that. Why is this coming out now? You say that you have a lot of passion for Zenless Zone Zero,
Yes.
right?
On a
you do
like
not-
relative to how much passion I have for any game this year, it is very high.
Okay, great. Let's examine that. Why do you have so much passion, and why is this coming out now? Like, in terms of the podcast, we haven't really talked about Zenless Zone Zero that much.
True. We
On
talked
your
about it
streams,
early
you do
on.
not stream Zenless Zone Zero.
I don't stream it because that's not the kind of game I stream.
So let's talk about. So do you talk about it with your other friends?
I do talk about it with my friends that also play it.
So this is kind of like something you only do with other people who play Zenless Zone Zero.
Generally, I don't talk a ton about it with many people. Correct.
There's a secret shame.
And that
here,
it's
Neil.
not because I'm ashamed
There
of it.
you have a secret shame. You have a secret
It is
shame
not because
of
I'm
Zenless Zone
ashamed of it.
Zero.
We do a podcast, and I have plenty of times said, I'm still playing Zenless Zone Zero. It's a thing I can talk about.
Yeah, but
we don't because
yeah, sure.
it's still Zenless Zone Zero, but like they
We
have
don't
been making...
because no. We don't because you don't have enough passion to bring it up. There's been times where I had enough passion to talk about things going on in Genshin, okay?
Mhm.
Like, I'm also guilty of playing gacha games, but I am not of the blood to be able to say Genshin Impact deserves to be in the top 10. Okay?
In my defense, I probably would have brought up Zenless Zone Zero if we were doing another podcast that wasn't this one in our next podcast.
Okay.
Because
Well,
the
that's a
fifth
little
chapter they did
too late.
doing kind of a like... This fifth chapter did a like credits type thing that is like, hey, we have completed a chunk of story in a way that is like, we have completed this. There's a credit sequence in the story mode because of that. So I was going to bring it up as like a, hey, Zenless Zone Zero has done this thing. Where it is right now feels like they have, and they are themselves saying, we have completed some portion of this thing. And I was going to talk about that
Wow,
on the
how
next
bold. They've completed a portion of the thing.
one. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it's going to
I'm
keep
not
going.
compelled.
They're going to keep doing new characters and stuff, but like,
I ain't compelled.
it is a thing I was going to bring up on the next podcast to talk about.
Alright, well, I'm looking at these other games. They do not belong beneath Zenless Zone Zero, Neil.
That's why I suggest Nine Souls, and you can't really say, because you haven't played Nine Souls either.
No, I haven't. But I just get the feeling that maybe in terms of like looking at what the gamers are trying to do, as you put it, I think that Nine Souls belongs above.
It is entirely possible that if I had played Nine Souls 3 months ago, it would be my game of the year.
Maybe.
Because of the kind of year it has been.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Why is Zenless Zone Zero not your game of the year?
Because of the gacha part.
But why does that allow it to be in the top 10?
Why not?
Why not?
Did you
Not
not
a great
put Genshin
argument.
Impact in your top 10 that year?
You know, I don't remember. That's a good question, you know.
We'd have to do a
Did
lot
I?
of homework to try to figure that out. But I feel like when Genshin
All right,
Impact came out,
bet,
it was
bet.
on a lot of people's lists as like, yes, this is a gacha game, but I love it. It's great. And Zenless Zone Zero is my that.
Yes, but also, following my criteria, it had innovation and scope. And yes, there have been lots of clones since, but it was the one that kind of put that style on the map. But let's look. Let's see if we can find the year that Genshin came out, and then try and find out like what my position was on that. Because if it is in top 10, I'll concede. You're gonna have to do some research now, though.
Oh, it's going to be hard because we don't have our old website anymore.
We don't. We do not have the old website. Do you have the old podcast?
Oh, you know I do.
I can
just
tell you
have
the
to
year.
fucking find it. What year was that?
Okay, let's see. Version 1.01. It was a 2020 game.
2020. Okay. I'm opening up the archive.
Yikes.
And I'm going to hunt this down. And I'm also making a note of where we are, because I'm probably going to cut a piece out here
All right.
as I look this up. We're at.
But if we're taking this bet, that means that if I didn't, it cannot be in top 10.
We're taking a bet.
I'm sorry, I just don't find that Zenless Zone Zero has the kind of innovation or scope.
All right, you said it was 2020.
Zenless Zone Zero was made on Genshin money. All right, let's just put it that way.
It super was.
I didn't play Genshin at 1.0. I actually played in 1.1 or 1.2, I think.
Really?
But I was able to catch up.
Okay. 2020. I'm opening it up.
Okay. You might want to like go to the part where you recite the order.
I'm getting to the end. I'm hoping we did.
Okay.
Oh, God, we were doing this differently in 2020.
Okay. Well, you still gotta figure it out. Have I mentioned Genshin Impact at all?
I'm not listening to the whole hour-long podcast right now. I'm trying to seek through it.
Just listen to it at 3 times speed.
Easier said than done.
That's still like 20 minutes. That's still like 20 minutes of time.
No, this was back when we were doing like a bunch of categories.
Oh, shit. Well, I guess it doesn't count then.
Yeah.
And it doesn't belong in the top 10. I never put Genshin in the top 10, Neil, because there was no top 10.
Not our combined top 10 because we didn't have one, sure, but that feels like that doesn't feel like the spirit of the bet.
No, it is the bet. It's literally the bet. I said if it wasn't the top 10.
But there was no
then
top
you could
10,
have...
so it can't, like, nothing was in the top 10.
Exactly.
By that logic, then,
including...
none of these games should be in the top 10 because we didn't have a top 10 back then.
No, by that bet. It doesn't have, the logic is out the window because we're talking about the bet criteria, not the criteria for every single game. All right, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You care way too deeply about this.
I do.
I'm going to give it to you.
All right.
But not because I think conceding is important for you to have the game in the top 10, but because I think this is a mark of shame.
That's fine. I will wear this mark of shame.
And I won't ever let you live it down.
Are we taking off
Okay.
Nine Souls or Riven here?
Yeah, I guess
Unless there's something else you'd rather
let's.
put.
Well, okay. Where else would Nine Souls go?
Number 10. Or I guess number 9 at this point.
Let's put Nine Souls at number 10 and Zenless Zone Zero at 11.
No. I guess it would go at number 9 if it wasn't Nine Souls.
I'll give Riven.
Okay. I can feel the pain in your voice there.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily because I picked Riven. It's because Zenless Zone Zero's in the top 10.
How about this then? Give it to me because last year I gave you Void Stranger as our game of the year, and I ended up hating it. Hating it is strong. I ended up being wildly disappointed by it.
Well, you know, Neil, that only makes it more valuable in the top spot for me. So.
All right. Number 10, Zenless Zone Zero, goodbye.
And also to be fair, you got to the ending and all the emotional impact was lost because you fucking reset the game.
I got near the first ending, yes, and I did fuck up.
Near the most poignant moment in that fucking game, like, let's just reset it. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like,
definitely
all the wind out of that.
Sucks because I'm streaming moment.
Yeah.
Zenless Zone Zero goes to number 10.
Yeah, well,
your turn, number 9. What are we doing?
I'm gonna put Diceomancer.
Okay.
I briefly talked about Diceomancer in one of the previous podcasts. It's very much like in the DNA of Slay the Spire, which is part of the reason why I can't let it go further. But boy, does it do a good job with what it's doing. It's got the artifact thing, it's got the branching map thing, it's got all the things from Slay the Spire, but the main difference is you get that dice that you can roll and literally edit any number on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you feel like you can do some really weird, messed up stuff, and you indeed can do some weird, messed up stuff. You can change your cards, you can change enemy stats, you can change the number of turns left on a buff, you can change the effect of the buff, you can change how much energy you have left to play cards. You can change anything. You can change the cooldown on the dice. So, like, you have the D6, and you have, like, it takes 2 charges to actually use it, and you have 2 charges left. You're like, oh, well, I only have 2 charges left anyway. Why don't I just roll the cooldown on it and increase it to 6 if I'm lucky? And then you just keep rolling. It's great. It's a very fun game, very creative mechanic. It is number 9. It does not need to go further than that.
All right. I guess I'll do Nine Souls next then. Again, I'm not far enough into it to feel super comfortable putting it super high. Even though, yes, my enjoyment of it right now has me comparing it to games like Hollow Knight, which I fucking adore. And Nine Souls is definitely in that vein.
How's the story been? I haven't been able to catch all of your streams, and I know there's some pretty interesting stuff going on
there.
The
story is a big part of why I don't feel super comfortable going super high up in there, because I'm still early enough on in it that I'm not sure if it's going to deliver.
Right. It's setting things up, but whether or not that actually is playing out in a way that will be satisfying, who knows?
I've had setups of, like, I have a sister and stuff now that I'm either having visions of, maybe, and it's a lot of
some
stuff
Dune
that's
going
like,
on.
I just don't know what's happening in the story 100% yet, so.
Oh, it's a Dune-like.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That makes it number 8?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at what we got left here. Let's read off what we have left.
All right. What we have left is UFO 50, Animal Well, Balatro, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I Am Your Beast, Unicorn Overlord, and Dragon's Dogma 2.
So, in this list, the game that you have played that I have not is Dragon's Dogma 2.
Correct.
Where are we aiming for that, Neil?
Pretty high.
Well, I need to know.
I'd like it to be in the top 5.
Okay. That's fair. I think now's the time to cut I Am Your Beast.
Okay.
It's high concept, okay? In that way, it is not high in scope.
Sure.
but boy, does it deliver in every other aspect. It feels so good, and like you already said, it evokes Neon White. But the problem with Neon White is the story, and I think that it is exactly what Neon White was going for, but it was very much what Neon White was going for. So it was kind
Sure.
of the thing that weighed it down a little bit. But I Am Your Beast is very much similar in the way that it's kind of like this really fast-paced, almost arcade-style shooter that's based on style and going fast. And there's a lot of things in place in terms of the gameplay to facilitate that. So it feels good, and it takes a while to like understand necessarily what's going on in any given level, but it only makes you want to play the level over and over again to try and like one up yourself. And again, that is exactly what Neon White was doing. So what is different about I Am Your Beast? Well, for one, Neon White was very strict and on rails. They had a path that they wanted you to take to the point that once you've done the level enough, you unlocked literally a thing showing you what path to take.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had very limited amounts of resources with the cards that you used as your weapons. Like, you a lot of the planning was you planning how to use those resources. And I'm not saying that's not present in I Am Your Beast, but it's a lot more open. And it feels a lot more creative when you are in the thick of it. And that's great. And, the levels are little sandboxes. It's not like Neon White where you have a very discrete path. I'm not saying that's the case for every level in Neon White.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very clear, like, when you watch a speedrun of Neon White, like, they're doing it a different way than what was intended and achieving really ridiculous speeds because of that. In I Am Your Beast, I feel like if you were to watch a speedrun, it's because they came up with a creative route that was not necessarily intentional, but encouraged by the things in place, rather than contrary to them. And then also the story. So, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to talk about this game in the podcast proper. But what I will say is that the way the story is presented, it doesn't break up the flow of the gameplay that much, which is really hard to do considering what the game is. And yet they still managed to put together a pretty interesting story about like this ex-agent for like the secret military organization who broke away from it and is just trying to live a peaceful life. But for whatever reason, the organization wants to bring him back in at any cost because they have a lot of interest, let's say. And so it talks a lot about like the military-industrial complex and what military does to people. And it's almost half lampooning it and half being very serious, yet the tone never feels off. And this is all accomplished with voiceover and text. Like, it's stylized text, but it's basically just like stylized text on backdrops, but it works. And like I said, it flows into what the game is in a good enough way that I feel like it does deserve to be in top 10. And yeah, maybe recency bias there, but it's really good. And the thing is, I didn't know about this game at all until you just randomly sent it to me for a Christmas gift.
I'm very glad that I found it and said, oh, this is like Neon White. I bet Matt would love this, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I wrote in my notes is like, it's like Neon White meets Hotline Miami, directed by Hideo Kojima.
Okay. That does fucking sound actually very good.
It's extremely good.
Okay. I guess I'm up, huh?
Mm-hmm.
This is where it gets real tricky.
I mean...
Is it...
Yeah.
Is it Indiana Jones time?
I think so.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Some of the best things that I would like to quote loosely, not verbatim, they're like Pirate Software. I don't know if you're familiar, but the gentleman who used to work for Blizzard Activision, who broke away and is developing his own game, He's very well spoken, has a lot of respect, basically throughout the entire streaming community. He played this game, booted up, and through the opening cutscene, he just sat there, and he didn't realize the game had transitioned into gameplay. He just was like staring at the screen.
Okay.
It's like, oh, I can move. Because it is just that high fidelity in terms of its graphical representation of the game. And this is valuable to me because I recently bought a new graphics card.
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to talk about my new rig because things have been so dense. But, I have a new computer, and the reason I play this game is because I got the new GPU, and it came as, like, the little gift that comes with it. Very likely I would have not bought this game, and that's a bias I have against AAA titles.
Mm-hmm.
I think this game was a $70 game. But it's so respectful of what Indiana Jones is. And the gameplay itself is how would I explain it? I always forget the name of this game. It's where you're playing as the assassin who was framed, and like you kind of go from place to place, and you're trying to figure out how you got framed and like who you got to kill.
Oh, the immersive sim game with like the whale oil and shit. Is that the one you're talking about? Dishonored.
Dishonored, yes.
Yeah.
It's very large scale levels, but not really open world. Let's say, like you travel from map to map, but they're very big open world, like traversal centric maps. And within these environments, you have like little side missions. You have the things that you need to do to progress the story. And between all of that, you have a lot of traversal. The traversal feels good. And the areas are very well made. And it feels like a genuine love letter to what Indiana Jones is. There's never in any point do you feel like you are doing anything that wouldn't have happened in one of these movies. And I know that's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around if you haven't played it, but it's all there, And I think that if I were to embody my experience with this, I would say that it's better than the last two Indiana Jones movies. Like,
to be fair, the last two Indiana Jones movies are pretty fucking bad.
Right.
But
right. It should be the original series plus this, and that is the canon.
Okay.
Like this feels more canon to Indiana Jones than those movies did.
Okay. I mean that it says quite a bit, in fact. So
yes, and that's exactly why I've allowed it to get as far into our games of 2024 as it has.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think that a lot of the puzzles are cute. I think that the way they integrate gameplay elements in a way that makes sense to what the setting is good. But I don't know how long this is going to stay with me, I don't think this is a game where I'm going to complete it and be like, time to go back and find all the little things. I'm going to be probably satisfied with whatever it was and move on with my life. I don't think it's going to leave a big impact other than just highlight how bad the movies have been recently.
It's one of those slightly tricky things too, where because it's a game and I know it's going to be, I don't know how long it is exactly, but way longer than a movie, it's going to be a lot harder to be like, oh, Indiana Jones, I should replay that game.
And there's a shock factor to it too, because there's so many movie adaptations for video games that are piss poor.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even make top 50.
Yeah.
If they came out this year. I just really, really appreciate what they did with the franchise here. I think that, there was a lot of, confetti thrown around at the Game Awards with Harrison Ford showing up and having his little moment. But it is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good game. And I'm astonished, probably not quite as much as I am that Zenless Zone Zero's at 10, but the fact that this game exists where it does as a AAA title, I'm surprised. But there it is.
Cool. I think you're up.
Um, well, where are we feeling Dragon's Dogma goes, Neil? Are we ready?
This is where things are definitely getting tough because Dragon's Dogma 2 is not my game of the year, it's my number 2.
Okay. Well, okay. Let me say this. I feel like this is where Unicorn Overlord belongs,
Okay.
but I don't know where you feel Dragon's Dogma belongs.
For me, Dragon's Dogma belongs under Animal Well. But that isn't to say directly under, just Animal Well should be higher than Dragon's Dogma. I like Dragon's Dogma more than UFO 50, but that's a weird conversation.
Okay. Um, yeah, but it's probably gonna end up being a conversation that has to be done.
Is it the one we have now?
For now, well, no, not quite
Okay.
yet. I think that Unicorn Overlord can go here. I wanted to play Unicorn Overlord simply because it was a Vanillaware game. Vanillaware, I am a Vanillaware faithful. I love that what they do with high fidelity 2D sprites in this world that's so obsessed with realistic graphics. I am glad that it is going above the game that I just talked about having extremely good 3D graphics. Uh, It is almost beat for beat a Fire Emblem game in terms of the story. But the gameplay is where this game became extremely interesting and unique. You do not control your characters. You merely suggest what they do under certain conditions, and you kind of do that in a kind of Gambit style Final Fantasy 12 kind of way. And so you go into your menus and you say, if this happens, then you should do this. If this happens, you should do this. If there's an enemy of this kind in the front row or in the back row, yada, yada, yada. And you are allowed so many things that you can set up to kind of program your characters. And they also have like all of these interesting stats with like how many times they get to act, like the different moves and how much energy they take. And the way that it introduces the different classes and the different abilities, it feels so organic in the way that the game progresses. And it even limits the amount of units you can have in a battalion to allow you to have the time to learn how these things interact. And as you progress through, you can start stacking more units together, and it gets more chaotic, and you have to assess things a lot more concisely. And it's just really interesting as a strategy game. So many strategy games are just chess with more things going on. That's not to say that it's bad, because chess is kind of like the ultimate strategy game.
Sure.
And it's iterating on that is to be expected. This felt like something different, and it is something different. But not many people I can talk with about this game because, like you said, it just hasn't been part of conversation that much. But beautiful game, wonderful ideas. If you like Fire Emblem, please give this a shot. It's different, but if you like the high fantasy, war politics setting, play it. It's very, very good. I also, it was kind of the last interesting game I had for Switch.
Yeah.
My
Switch
not a lot of Switch games on this list.
This year.
There's not a lot going on for the Switch this year. I already talked about Echoes of Wisdom.
Yeah.
That game has already been cut.
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting on the successor and what comes with that. But it's been a bit dry. I'm not saying there hasn't been stuff for the Switch, but nothing compelling enough for me to go out of my way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We'll go ahead and let Unicorn Overlord go there.
Okay. I guess now's the conversation. UFO 50.
It sure is. No. No, 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 no.
So, is UFO 50 your number one?
I don't know if I'm ready to disclose what my number one is,
Okay.
Neil.
Because for me,
You're asking me.
UFO 50
you're asking me to show
is
my hand
awesome
here.
from a value proposition, but
Value
I can't
proposition. What is
overlook
this?
the fact that, for me at least, there's 50 games in there, and at least 10 of them are games I'm not super into, if not kind of annoyed by or don't want to play. And I can't just ignore that 20-ish% or more and say...
Why? Why can you not ignore it?
It's a good question.
Exactly. So let's say that there's 10 games that aren't good for you.
Mhm.
That means there's 40 games that are.
And this is the thing. I am sitting here saying, like, I'm trying to look at UFO 50 on the whole, and why I said I think it's a good value proposition is I think you can tell basically anybody, get UFO 50, you will find something you like in it. But
Okay.
there's still a bunch in there that's like, to me. So, that's just why I was saying this is why I'm looking at it and going like, is this UFO 50 time? You're saying no, though?
It's not.
Just straight up?
Yep, not allowing that
Okay.
one.
Then we haven't talked about Balatro at all. And I want to talk about Balatro.
It's time, yes. So, Balatro won, he didn't win Game of the Year, but it was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game
It
Awards.
sure was.
It's received a lot of acclaim. Even though it didn't take Game of the Year, it won several awards.
It did.
Made by one dude. I think that I don't know if I said this on the podcast, but I feel like Windows 12, like Microsoft should buy Balatro and put it on every fucking Windows computer.
Fucking banger
moving
of a
forward.
song, too.
Yes, it has one song and it is amazing. It's like the Pacific Rim of video games in that regard. I think it can go.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you. I really like Balatro a lot. For me, it's slightly higher than UFO 50. But Balatro is super awesome for what it does. It takes the roguelike style of game and transplants it with all the skin of a poker game, despite definitely not being a poker game at all. And I do really think there's kind of two types of roguelike. There's the Hades style, where you get a bunch of kind of modifiers to your abilities to feel powerful and do cool shit. And there's ones like Balatro, where you are finding all these jokers and literally breaking the fucking game to get absurd point values to beat these levels. And they're different styles. One is about breaking and encouraging that, and the other one is about just making a strong build. Balatro is really good at making that breaking style feel awesome. But that is... I'm not going to come back to Balatro the same way I come back to Slay the Spire, you know?
Sure. I think what you're talking about is Balatro has an enormously high skill cap. Like, if you know the way that Balatro works, if you know what's available, like, you can already do things in poker, like counting cards, right? And Balatro, if you are interested in that, Balatro allows you to, like, quickly, at a glance, look at what's in your deck, you know? And that gives you a very distinct advantage that normally people spend a lot of time trying to learn in order to kind of curb odds at the poker table. And that was the first thing that kind of made it compelling for me. But when you start to unlock different jokers and understand like how they work and play them with each other and kind of hedge your bets, then it doesn't feel as much as an RNG thing, even though it obviously is. But you know, you can look at like what you have and assess and plan, and then once you are understanding the game, you are going to start winning more often than not. And that's, I think, the mark of a good roguelite that doesn't have, like, the permanent progression,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it has things that you unlock, sure. But it's not like Hades, where you unlock things at the hub and, like, for every run thereafter, you have this.
Yeah, you're not unlocking something that says you get a boss anti reroll every round, no matter what. Like,
Yeah, every start in Balatro is a fresh start, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
And I think for me, one of the most astonishing things about Balatro is just, while to having such a high skill cap, like a ceiling for like that you can get to, it is extremely approachable even by people who don't know poker.
yeah, yeah,
And it's gotten out there, obviously. It's extremely successful, and I think that it deserves all of the acclaim that it gets. But, you know, as someone who is more entrenched in games and not just looking at, you know, how successful something is, we need to start talking about these other entries. And I think that Dragon's Dogma, I think we need to talk about that.
yeah, yeah. I'm okay with letting Dragon's Dogma happen here, but I am going to say my couple of words about it.
Well, is it dragons and then the other word is dogma?
No, no, no. We mentioned earlier, and maybe it's been a little bit of a lonely year. Dragon's Dogma 2, the way that the pawn system works in it, especially compared to the first game, which I also played at the beginning of this year, does a really good job of making traversal and just running around the world feel way more like a tabletop RPG to me than any of these other games that are explicitly trying to evoke that, like Baldur's Gate 3 and stuff, which is like, this is Dungeons and Dragons. Like, none of those work for me the way Dragon's Dogma does, where it's a lot of the little things of running around with the party, things like having one pawn in your party who knows Elvish, so that when you are talking to elves, you can actually understand them. And then you pile on top of that the way that the different classes work and the amount of variance, and like, I'm not going to say it's as deep as the weapons in Monster Hunter, but you can feel a lot of that same style of approach in this game, and it makes the rogue feel wildly different than the warrior, and both of them are super fun. The biggest attraction for the game is there's not all that many enemy types, and while it didn't really rub on me the wrong way, I can see how that would be something that gets a little bit samey for a lot of people. And last but not least, the fucking moment where you actually get the Dragon's Dogma 2 title card, like 75% of the way through the game, moment of the year for me. Fucking incredible.
Yeah, you know, I watched a video on that. It actually talked about other games that do similar things, where it's hard to, they don't clearly define like how the relationship between the original game and its sequel actually is. And then, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. This was a game that I did not play.
Mm-hmm.
It was the one that I didn't want to mess with. I knew that if I probably tried to like neg you on this, it would be like, no, this needs to go higher up. And you know, we finally got to the point where you're talking about it needs to go below Animal Well, right?
Yeah.
So, Dragon's Dogma 2, wonderful game. Didn't play it. Animal Well.
I guess one more thing I should say.
Oh, okay.
We all know I'm not an open world guy. Game guy.
You're not an open world guy game, that's true.
Dragon's Dogma 2 is very much an open world game, and I didn't fall off of it, which says something about it doing it right. Like, anyway, okay. Animal Well. I think Animal Well should be above UFO 50.
So you're saying Animal Well should be the top?
I think Animal Well should be our game of the year.
Okay, but why over UFO 50?
And I know this is kind of personal, I was a little bit worried after playing Void Stranger that maybe I wasn't as into this kind of game anymore. And that was part of why I chafed against Void Stranger. And Animal Well told me, no, you still like this shit. And I was like, thank God.
Okay, but what do you mean?
What do I mean?
The shit?
Hey, there's a lot more going on than what the kind of surface of this game is.
Oh.
That style of puzzle, the tunic, hey, do you want to do the entire instruction book thing?
Well, yeah, you don't realize you're doing the entire instruction book thing. That's like part of the fun of that.
Yeah.
You don't really know what you're doing in Tunic. And again, in Animal Well, you don't really know what's going on in Animal Well. Yeah. And honestly, you still, even if you did all of the extra stuff, you still don't really know what's going on in Animal Well.
Totally okay? Fair.
Let's be clear. Like, you could do every layer of that game. You could peel away every layer. And then when you boot it up again and you start a new game, you're like, what's going on? Like, you still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Is that indicative of being one of those games? I think that the developer had a lot of very interesting ideas for doing things both within the confines of the game and outside of the confines of the game, and he resolved to do all of it. I don't think there was any idea that was left on the table by this guy. And I think that's very admirable, but some of this stuff is kind of prohibitive. It's very time consuming, and not just time consuming, but like effort consuming, I guess is the word. But, you know, there's puzzles in this game that you can literally not solve by yourself.
Yeah.
You have to have your community do it, because there'll be a piece of the puzzle that is hard-coded to your copy of the game. Like, there's that meme of like every copy of Mario 64 is unique because but like literally for Animal Well.
Yes, if you are going deep enough that you want to get like the third ending, you do have to engage with going outside the game for it, straight up. You know, I would like to hear your argument for why you think UFO 50 should be above it.
Barbuda. Game of the year.
Barbuda's not one of the good ones.
Barbuda is the best one, and that if I had to split UFO 50 into all of its 50 games to include on this list, Barbuda is number 1 game of the year 2025.
Why?
Because it invokes everything of what gaming was at its most fetal, you know, in its developing stages of gaming. That's what it was. I'm not seriously arguing that Barbuda is the best, by the way. I do. Sure. Like, what I'm saying is, all of these games are representative of both the time that they are trying to emulate, but also invoking modern sensibilities where they can, and making compelling and still unique experiences. And juggling all of that with also the confines of the limited color palette that they invoked, and also trying to make it cohesive enough to feel like it came from the same studio. Like, there was so much consideration, not just as UFO 50, but in each individual game. And, you know, there is also more of that shit, as you have coined, in UFO 50. There's other layers to UFO 50 as well. It doesn't go as deep as Animal Well. I don't know how much you engaged with, but I do think that the things in UFO 50, I think that the things in UFO 50 are more accessible if you care to go for that. Animal Well, wonderful game. I think that a lot of the things in that game are far more cryptic. And you know, I think that it's one of those things that's kind of like EVE Online, right? Where I get a lot of joy about reading about these things, but
Hmm.
in no way would I ever want to spend the time doing it myself.
I definitely cannot argue that once you do all the like the full eggs quest in Animal Well, that was kind of my like, let me play around a little bit more, see what else is really going on, but I've done what I need to and I'm satisfied. Um, I mean, if you really feel way more passionate about UFO 50,
Well, here's the thing, Neil. You know how
mm-hmm,
long I was waiting for UFO 50. It's been on my wish
I do.
list like 2 years before the game came out. I love Derek Yu. I love Spelunky. I think that he does very good work. He brought a little team together and they made something wonderful. And for how much I was hyped about this, hearing about like the concept, it has surpassed my expectations. So I not many games do that. I mean,
Okay.
there's often times that I can be surprised by a game that I didn't know about. There's times I can be happy that it met my expectations, or even
Mm-hmm,
happy that
mm-hmm.
it didn't, betray what was trying to happen in the game. But very, very few times do I anticipate a game and also have it surpass my expectations. So,
Okay.
um, UFO 50 is that. Animal Well, I mean, I have vaguely heard about it, but it's not like I was anticipating Animal Well, you know? And so I was pleasantly surprised, right?
Sure.
And I was interested in like the different layers of depth that you could engage with Animal Well. But to a certain point, it had gotten exhausting. I got all the eggs as well. I played the thing and got, and I learned that, oh, that when you have the cat meowing, that's actually a song. And if you mimic the notes that the cat meows, you can open that chest. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not ever going to do that. That's cool that that's a thing. And I appreciate that you can do that. I ain't gonna.
Mm-hmm,
That sounds
mm-hmm.
exhausting. And so there were things in this game that are cryptic and interesting that I am never ever going to feel the need to touch on. And I'll watch
Okay.
it on YouTube and have fun with that. But UFO
Well, I
50,
mean, go ahead, go ahead.
it compels me to want to discover things, Like, again, you didn't really engage with any of that like weird ARG stuff. I recommend you look into it and maybe
Mm-hmm.
get back to me. But yeah, there's going to be games that are not as fun, but I want to experience them, even if I don't enjoy them.
Okay. Okay. Well, I did say earlier that my passion for all games this year was maybe a little bit dampened, uh, relatively speaking, to maybe some other years. So I think you sound much more passionate about UFO 50 than I am about Animal Well. I just think that Animal Well is better than Dragon's Dogma 2 overall. Um, so if we're doing Animal Well and then UFO 50 is number one, I think that's okay. I can live with that.
Well, we do have one more game.
Do we?
Case of Cud, baby. I decided it's going back on the list.
Oh, did
And
you?
now it's going to be number 1.
I see. You just wanted to put Zenless Zone Zero to number 11, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's the only reason you brought Caves of Cud back.
Yeah, actually, I want to add a Hades too, so we can make it number 12.
Nah. We're not doing that.
Uh,
Here's the list, if you want to read it out to everybody from top to bottom.
all right. In order, descending to ascending from least liked game of 2024 to most liked game. Generally speaking, this is not something that we've done deliberation on this. Doesn't necessarily mean there's consensus, but the audio games of the year 2024 is as follows: Pal World, Odada, Web Fishing, Nightmare Cart, Pokemon TCG Pocket, Doronko Wonko, Peglin, Pinball Spire, Ember Ward, Shogun Showdown, Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain, Infinite Craft, Still Wakes the Deep, Poke Rogue, Harold Halibut, Neva, Ballionaire, Marvel Rivals, Echoes of Wisdom, and Riven, the 2024 remake. Now, this is the top 10, okay? It's going to leave a bad taste in my mouth starting out here, but this is the top 10.
Do you want me to say this one just so you don't have to?
No, I'll do it.
Okay.
Not going to like it, but I'll do it. Number 10, Zenless Zone Zero. Number 9, Diceomancer. Number 8, Nine Souls. Number 7, I Am Your Beast. Number 6, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Number 5, Unicorn Overlord. Number 4, Balatro. Number 3, Dragon's Dogma 2. Number 2, Animal Well. And the Audio Games 2024 Game of the Year, UFO 50.
It's a pretty good list.
Yeah, looking back on that year, it's sometimes it's hard to feel like you're in a good gaming year, but then you look and you say, oh, there were actually good games. And there was also Pal World.
There was a bunch of games that I don't think either of us touched that were pretty bad, but that's
Yeah.
why we didn't touch them.
Yeah. And there's probably games out there that were good that we didn't play.
Oh, definitely.
And I apologize for not making the time or the money to play those games. But
I will say I'm really happy to see Dragon's Dogma 2 as high as it is.
well, we all deserve one. And I gave you 2. So
Well, I know also Dragon's Dogma 2 didn't end up on a lot of people's lists in part because, and I had a brand new computer, maybe that's part of it, but people had some issues with the being able to run the game. Apparently it didn't run super good on the consoles, for example. I didn't run into any of that. It was just a great experience for me. So,
well, I mean, this could have been a very different list had you not gotten a new computer.
well, yeah. I think all of the indies might have been a little higher if that were the case.
I mean, again, our list is still mostly indies.
It definitely is.
But that's just what you get with audio games.
Yeah.
What's 2025 looking like? I don't know. I got a new computer. I gotta justify this shit. Maybe I'll play more AAA games. Has my faith been renewed? No. But, I try and put myself out there. Budget, with withholding certain titles maybe, but is there anything in particular that you're anticipating? Do you want to hand out some awards? Maybe best music? Did you have anything prepared?
I don't have a lot prepared. Best music, I mean, I kind of want to just say Balatro, even though it's really best song when you do that.
Agreed. Best song, best soundtrack, Balatro. Most anticipated. Yeah, we have a list of games we played. We've sampled some things this year that are not out.
I mean, my most anticipated is the upcoming Monster Hunter game. I don't think that's going to be a big surprise to anybody.
No. We both played the beta on that one. I got in because of Neil, so thank you, Neil.
You're welcome.
And also 2XKO.
Yeah. So I'm because we don't know 100% that's coming out this year, I'm not putting that as most anticipated. But if they come out suddenly and say, "Hey, there's a date and it's this year," that is jumping up that fucking most anticipated list probably to the top.
Huh. Okay. Well, what was the most disappointing thing in terms of gaming this year?
Thing?
Yeah, just gaming adjacent, gaming related thing.
Oh.
And there's a lot to be. I mean, let's not say news. Let's say product. Like, obviously, there's going to be a lot of disappointing news. But in terms of something offered to consumers, what is the most disappointing thing?
I mean, I think it has to be. Fuck, what was the name of that game? The one that only lasted 2 weeks.
Oh, Concord.
Concord. I wanted to say Callisto, and I'm like, that's not it.
I
Yes,
almost
Concord, I think, has to be the most disappointing, even though I didn't touch it. It was so disappointing, they took it the fuck down
yeah.
in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That is certainly a first for something of that scale. A lot of money went into Concord.
And then they still put out the fucking secret level thing on Amazon, the like show for it.
Did they?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
The Concord episode is on there, and you can't, that game doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
It's fucking crazy.
That's so weird. Yeah, I think that it's hard to top Concord this year in terms of disappointment. But I mean, there were some other things that I think, it's fun to look back on, knowing that we are putting a year distance between us and them. Alarmo. What the fuck?
I forgot about that. I fully forgot about that already.
Everybody's sitting on their haunches waiting for the big news from Nintendo, and Nintendo, with knowing everybody's watching, is like, alarm clock? It's like, what the fuck?
Nintendo.
And unfortunately, this is not something that we can distance ourselves from for the year, because it actually has not yet come out, but the Minecraft movie, oh my god.
It's about to happen.
It's, yeah.
Crazy.
I don't think that that's going to be very good. But yeah, I think 2025, there's a lot to be worried about, but also a lot of interesting things coming out as well. We're in uncertain times.
I do have one thing I want to get your prediction about.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
Will we get a Hollow Knight 2 release date? Not for this year, but announced this year.
Every time there's a big game show, like a big place where games are shown, I try and hold on to what's left of my optimism. But if I was to answer honestly, no, I don't think that we're gonna hear shit about Silk Song.
I'm putting my foot down. I think we're going to get a release date announcement this year.
I don't think that they have enough of a grip on what their game is trying to be for them to commit to a date. I think the reason we haven't gotten one is exactly because of that. They do not have investors. Team Cherry is working on the money of Hollow Knight, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't answer to anybody. And that's,
not a soul.
In most ways, that's great. You want creative people to be able to make the thing that they're working on. But the leaks that we've heard, well, not necessarily that we've heard, but from what I've heard, from people who have been allowed to playtest the game, the communication has been like, they just keep wanting to add stuff.
Yeah. I had a thought. One more big anticipated thing. This one on a smaller scale, so to speak.
Okay.
Mina the Hollower.
Yeah, I backed that game.
I feel like they said something about it probably being out this year. That is also pretty high on my anticipation list.
So same people who made Hollow Knight. This is Yacht Club Games.
Shovel Knight.
What did I say?
Hollow Knight. We were just talking about Hollow Knight. Right. It makes sense.
Yeah, no, the Shovel Knight, the people who made Shovel Knight, Yacht Club Games, I feel like they're very much the kind of people who kind of give you exactly what you're expecting. I'm not saying they had a lot of like things in their library to like demonstrate that, but of the Shovel Knight content that they have, if you'll excuse the pun, shoveled up, you kind of get exactly what you're expecting. I think that's a good thing, but I just don't understand. I'm not sure what the scope of Mina the Hollower is going to be, because it's like trying to emulate a Game Boy Color game, and that's compelling to me, but also it's extremely limiting if you're trying to stick to that. Even more so than what they were doing with Hollow Knight. Or not Hollow Knight, god damn it, Shovel Knight.
That's okay. We're getting late. This is a much longer recording than usual, which is why, everybody, thank you so much for being here for us for another year. I hope that all of you played some games in 2024 that you enjoyed and look forward to playing some new ones here in 2025. I look forward to hearing from all of you. If you want to email us, the thingy is going to say stuff because I'm not going to do it right now. I'm tired and it's been a long time and I got to pee. Bye.
Oh, okay.
No, what do you got?
Can I be honest with you, Neil?
Uh-huh.
My favorite thing about recounting games of the year at the end of or beginning of the new year is not necessarily, thinking about the last year in gaming. It's also about, like, giving myself some breathing space to play games that aren't from this year. Like, I want to play some old games, man. I felt so crunched to play new games in the last 3 months, knowing that this moment was coming. That I was like, I can't play this older game. I gotta play new game. But now I have some space to breathe and I can play some old game again.
What old game are you looking forward to right now?
I don't fucking know, man. Let's give me a break.
Okay. I have one on my list, only from like 2 years ago or whatever. But that Chants of Sennaar game you gave me is something I'm hoping to start up real soon here.
You gonna stream it?
No, I'm just gonna. I'm gonna do that one for me. That one's gonna be for me.
Oh, you know what? I wanted to play Cobalt Core. I hadn't played that yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Goodbye again, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Audio Games is hosted and produced by Matthew Lane and Neil Jimenez. Our theme music is Recharging by Gooset. If you'd like to reach out to us, please email us at audiogamespodcast@gmail.com.